All right, good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LaBeouf here with you. Brad Vandelay, Dustin Dodery with me. Tonight is, I think, going to be a great conversation. Something that I kind of been wanting to talk about for a little bit, so I thought we'd dive into it tonight. And I just titled this episode Jekyll and Hyde. Obviously, most people are familiar with the characters of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I kind of wanted to explore it because the setup's pretty simple to this, but I think when you look at a man who's taken on the responsibility to protect himself, his family, his property, so to operate as his own first responder, I think what a lot of people see from the outside, maybe the actions he takes, the training he does, the way he perceives the world, just basically everything that you can kind of see from the outside, perspective is very different than what you get when you actually start getting behind the curtains, or you end up, there's another side to the guy when you end up in a tactical situation, when all of a sudden now it's time to actually defend and protect what you hold dearest. So I kind of likened it to this Jekyll and Hyde type character. And so I just thought we'd take a little bit of time and go deep on this. And again, one of the probably biggest motivating factors of why I wanted to talk about this is because I think there's a lot of guys out there that have that desire to want to be protectors. They feel like, that is my role. That is what I'm willing to do. Not all of them have the capability to do it. Everyone has the potential for the capability, but we've talked about this lots where we say there's no such thing as tough. There's trained and untrained. And so I think one of the things that training gives people is, again, referring back to the characters, the analogy we've kind of set up, the Jekyll and Hyde character is Dr. Jekyll creates a formula that he thought would suppress. And in the story, of course, it's more his insidious, evil kind of desires. But in reality, it ends up kind of allowing him to live this duality. So, again, training and weaponizing, I think, is a catalyst that actually can create the Hyde character, but not necessarily. Obviously, we're not talking, this guy becomes this evil force, but, kind of like what happens to the thing. It's just this, there's a difference between the two. So I want to dive deep into this. I want to get your guys' perspective. So, stick with us. My new mission is, again, we just cut back from the intro. I saw we had a little bit of a technical glitch. It cut out a little bit for us on a second, but the setup was pretty simple. I called this episode Jekyll and Hyde. And the idea is, again, that when you look at somebody who's taken on the responsibilities of a protector, what you see from the outside isn't always what you get on the inside. There's a difference. There's a Jekyll, there's a Hyde side of it. Maybe, I did a bit of a setup for it already, so I'm just going to let you guys jump in with your visceral kind of opinions on this and just kind of get your first reaction to what I'm setting up here.
Yeah, I think for me, what kind of hit is just a person's natural personality, in the sense that you alluded to, there's no such thing as tough. There's only trained and untrained. And not everybody may be in the moment, prepared or best suited to defend themselves or their families, but it can be trained. And I think I kind of look at personality traits, especially like dominant personality traits, as no different than attributes. Attributes being things like speed, timing, strength, all that stuff. And it's like some people have personality traits that are maybe going to serve them better in dealing with violence, and other people will be the exact opposite. And so, yeah, you might be fortunate. You might have that personality trait, but if you don't, it can and needs to be developed. And so I know for me in my journey, like my personality traits, dominant personality traits, more people pleasing, more of a service sort of personality. And it's like, that's great. That does well for me in business and in certain personal relationships. That's not great in violence. Do you know what I mean? That's not. So I might spend all day in one personality that's great for my business, but it's the complete opposite potentially of maybe what I need in violence, for example, right? It's not that simple or cut and dry, but I think you get my point. And other people may have an occupation that allows them to exist in a personality that way more closely resembles, that Mr. Hyde character that they might want to access in violence. So yeah, to me, it's an attribute, and yeah, it can be trained and all that. So
just before you go, Brad, I love what you just said, because a couple of the things I think are really worth doubling down on like natural personalities, and I really like the part about just talking about where you spend most of your time. Like, you know, again,
Yeah.
your professional persona out in the workplace, this and that, and how, you know, you bring more of one part of your personality to that, and so you spend a lot of time in that. Whereas, like you say, then all of a sudden, when you're talking about defending yourself, that's a very different side of your personality. So again, I love that analogy of, it's because it's not an analogy, it's an attribute. But I like the connecting to like, where do you spend the majority of your time, because that then
Yeah.
becomes typically one of your stronger, more
Of
go-to
course.
default dominant personality traits, right? So I really like that in terms of the setup of the bigger conversation. So, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, my mind went to a spot of almost like an onlooker, somebody looking in from the outside, and almost like viewing me as a person, and excuse me, thinking about like having that tool of violence and being able to wield that tool of violence. Like that's weaponizing, right? Is being able to use the tool of violence to protect yourself, your family, your loved ones in a moment of crisis. And you know, it's like I agree with Dustin. Like I wasn't born with these abilities. You know what I mean? Like I spent over 20 years building this person. You know, to be able to have that ability to use the tool of violence. And I think it's like kind of those two different characters where, you know, like, you know, it's not where, like, kind of echoing, it's like it's not where I spend my time, and predominantly in my everyday life. Like you, I could think back of people and you're talking to them about violence and weaponizing and all these things, and maybe this is somebody in your life that you haven't fully spent a lot of time with, and you get into these conversations and people are like, what? I would have never known. I would have never even thought that this was something that was of interest for you, or something of within your capabilities, because you're not walking around with that persona of like, oh, I'm a violent person. And I think violence is one of those things, like it's a very taboo thing that we're not supposed to have these conversations about. And that's one of the biggest values of our podcast is like, yeah, we're talking about these conversations. And it's like, just because I train and I understand and I study and I educate myself in the theater of violence does not make me a violent man
Mm-hmm.
to my wife or to my children, and those sorts of things. I could be a man of violence, but it doesn't make me a violent man, you know. And I think that most people have a hard time differentiating those two. So when they see people like us and they're like, oh, like you guys are just normal people that you have trained in this field for many many years and understand it. It's like, yeah, one, like absolutely,
Yeah.
you know. So I just, again, like I have that view of that onlooker being like, yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that, because there's just a huge disconnect. Even knowing that normal everyday people like the three of us and people that are training and clients and those sorts of things is like, no, like they're weaponizing for that, and that's learning to deal with violence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, again, I like the analogy of what is it that people see, and like you just said multiple times about the expectation. It's not what they expect, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful thing, because the individuals, like, a lot of being able to protect yourself. You don't want to advertise. It's not an overt thing. Most of the skill sets are covert, not overt. And you know, there's a difference between people that you look at somebody that's involved in martial arts or a combat sport. It's very overt. It's very open. It's very public. It's very out there, right? It's a sport. You can watch it. It's entertainment. I mean, you just can see everything that they're doing, all this type of stuff. Whereas when you're talking about, you know, just pure protection against violence, it's not like it's this hidden secret. It's not. But the methodologies, the strategies, tactics, what you're doing or what you would have to do, or being willing to have, you would have to be willing to do, are very different things, and they can be very dark subject matters. Because, and again, at some point, you know, we tend to have to set this up for the people that are watching, because it gets misconstrued very, very quickly. Obviously, we are talking about the times when you are facing, when it is reasonable for you to believe that you're facing imminent grievous bodily harm or death. So let's just set that aside. We already understand that when there is in fact somebody whose behavior, actions, words, whatever it is, are now a threat to you or your family, then you are going to take action off that. Like, that is what it is. They take actions, their actions have consequences. There's going to be reactions to those actions. And so when you are facing a legitimate threat, then you are going to do what needs to be done. Context determines the content. So the context of the situation determines the content. So if we can just, say, okay, that's why we used to always say when legally and morally justified. Okay, so once that is there, then again, you go into this Hyde type, you are creating, you are training, you are weaponizing a different part of you. And I believe that it is in all people. I believe that let's just talk about this real quick. There are people that would deny the fact that human beings have violence in them, that they're capable of violence. Yet, if you look around the world, human beings are clearly capable of extreme acts of violence. They are capable of atrocities. Human beings do things to other human beings that animals would never even consider doing. You know what I mean? Like, because we have this ability to think evil, where in the animal kingdom, these are survival instincts. They'll do things to protect, they'll do things to hunt, they'll do things to survive. You know what I mean? Whereas human beings, we are capable of rational thought, conscious thought, and this, but this powerful cognition that we have is also and can also and does get funneled into some very, very sick and twisted types of things that human beings then carry out against other human beings. So listen, human beings have a capacity for violence that is unequaled by anything else on the planet. So somebody can sit there and say, well, that's not me. I'm a civilized human being. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? Everybody's civilized until, God forbid, there's a shortage on toilet paper. Then you'll see some uncivilized motherfuckers at the Costco. Do you know what I mean? There's a shortage of eggs? Well, I'm taking fucking 50 pallets of eggs, and I'd like to see somebody try to stop me. Like, we've seen how uncivilized people become when nothing's on the line. You know what I mean? Toilet paper, like, come on. Right? So what happens when shit gets real? Human beings get fucking savage. I'd say they go wild, but that's not being fair to the animal kingdom, right? Because that's just, human beings go far beyond wild. So I like this idea, though, that when you train, again, you are training to develop at its full capacity a part of your personality or side of human nature that most people link to just pure evil. Mm-hmm. Yet they can't see, or they don't agree, or whatever it is, that same capacity can be used for good. I often talk about how, violent criminals think evil, and they use the tool of violence to destroy, degrade, debase, dehumanize, and to dominate and take what they want. That's what evil people do, right? Evil people try to fuck with other people. But then you have good men that can also utilize the tool of violence, the strategies, tactics, and tools, but to preserve life, right? To protect, all of those different righteous things. The greatest right we have as a human being is the right to life. No other right trumps the right to life, because if you don't have life, then no other right matters. And so you get this kind of, but that is to me where really good training has to explore this Jekyll Hyde kind of persona. Although, I don't see, it's not a great, full out analogy, because, again, like, you're not developing this Mr. Hyde to, express these deep, evil seated things and feelings and thoughts that you have. But at the end of the day, a good man, a righteous man, a moral man, well within his legal rights, in the defense of his family, when legally and morally justified, you know what I mean? My thoughts aren't happy thoughts. Like, if you got someone that's trying to murder your family, someone's trying to hurt your family, your thoughts are going to go, you know what I mean? Well, doom on you. Like that's the mindset. Like at what part, does war or violence or combat or anything like that? I mean, it's not pleasant on any level, whether you're talking about military conflicts, law enforcement conflicts, or civilian conflicts. I mean, over 30 years of doing this, we've all, you guys have been doing this for 25 plus years. We've all seen our fair share of like, graphic, horrific outcomes to violence. And again, whether or not you're seeing an innocent person or innocent people that have been murdered on a battlefield in the middle of a war, or whether you're seeing it on your city streets and seeing our law enforcement officers responding to that, or whether you're seeing a domestic dispute or a case of stalking or a case of, gang initiations or whatever it is, a dead body's a dead body's a dead body. You know what I mean? Lives have been destroyed, degraded, debased, dehumanized. You know what I mean? Like violence is an ugly, ugly subject matter. So in defense of that, to prevent that, it's almost this thing where people are always looking or want a solution to violence that doesn't contain any of the horror, that doesn't contain any of the graphic details. Do you know what I mean? It's like, It's like you just got this dark, horrible stuff, and you want this light and this redeeming qualities and these things that are beautiful to be able to be the counter for that. But at the end of the day, violence is just a tool. Self-defense or murder is determined after in a court of law.
Well, it's almost like people want to, like they deny. They're like, there's got to be another way. And, it's Tim Larkin, right? Violence isn't always the answer, but when it is the answer, it's the only answer.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that rings true. It's like, yeah, sometimes there is other ways, but when it's not, when this is the only answer, like that's the only answer. There's no other way to skirt around it. Like,
yeah. And see, again, like it helps somewhat, I guess, for people to have a sense of scale of like from a 1 to a 10, 10 being like the worst case scenario. You're dealing with the highest level of threat where it's literally, I may need to take life to preserve life, which is obviously really dark, intense. Nobody wants to go there. Nobody ever wants to have to do that stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're unless you're completely ignorant to the realities of the world, that is the only solution to some problems. But yes, there are many other layers of things that happen that still require a response. But obviously, you might not have to go to that extreme. But I still just see this image of like, when you are threatened in whatever way you are threatened, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you're going to respond to that threat. And you're going to respond at an appropriate amount of response, or, I don't want to just say force, because it's not always about physical force, but it can be about counter psychological force, mental force, spiritual force. Do you know what I mean? Like, but there's going to be a response, because when you are attacked, you will then defend. That's the nature of a protector, is that we are going to defend and going to defend in an appropriate way. But I still think that, if you put yourself, I can form it in a question maybe. If you guys find yourself in a situation where somebody is attacking you, threatening you, and now not just in it, let's take physical off the table right at this moment. But there is somebody who is mentally or emotionally, becoming a threat to you, your relationships, your whatever it is. What are you guys going to do? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to walk away? Or are you going to respond in an appropriate way? As a protector, what's your visceral response to that?
Do something because it is something. Like, really.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Going to do something because it is something. And again, there's lots of things people can do that have nothing to do with the physical side of it. But of course, at the end of the day, what's the baseline for all assaults? An assault, here's some survivable value. If you look at an aggression continuum, and at the bottom of the aggression continuum, you have what's called DC, which is a disengaged conflict. So let's say it's not this physical conflict. But the second that there is some sort of threat, some sort of like, let's think of it like a seed. The second a seed has been planted and that seed is growing in terms of people that are being rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent, or whatever it is, or threatening, or manipulating, or whatever that is, that seed is going to grow, or it's going to die. But it's doing something. And so even at a very low level, the seed is growing and it's mutating to what? What path is it ultimately on? It's on a path where it becomes a crisis, where it becomes physical. A lot of stuff never gets to that point. But the concept we're talking about is if you leave a seed and the seed sprouts, and then the seed goes from, it sprouts and then it becomes something, it grows, inevitably now you have a much bigger, much potentially harder problem to resolve. And that's where, again, understanding that there are always actions that people can take. And when you are threatened, it's like, I think you need that trained, weaponized, professional side of yourself that has to then step up, that isn't operating from an emotional place, although there is emotions there, but is operating from a strategic and tactical place of doing a threat assessment. And like you said, Dustin, do something because it is something. I'm not going to ignore this. This is something. Something's happening. So countermeasures are already be taken. Like you're already kicking into this different kind of character. And then, of course, the more serious that this becomes, the more that this other side of you, starts to operate, starts to be revealed. And a lot of people, I don't think, really understand. I guess my not analogy, my story would be, if I think back to the first few times that I was ever honored and privileged enough to be around some tier one guys and, operators, people going to harm's way, people that, and that's even military law enforcement. Even if I just think about the times that I've been around guys that are the civilian world that are, really, really switched on individuals. When you're just talking to them, you see one side of them. When you train with them, or when you see them kind of more in that operational mindset, they're a different animal. Like it is, they're very different people. And I don't know if a lot of people have been around people who don't just talk about things, but do things. Like they don't just talk about what they do, they've done it. They've been there, they've done it, they've taken those actions. So I don't think you have a lot of people in the world that understand the difference between talking and prepping while talking, and then people that have executed and been like, oh yeah, no, I will do these things. Like these are actions I will take. And that's kind of, to me, the Jekyll versus the Hyde side of it. Is it's like Dr. Jekyll can talk all day long about Mr. Hyde, and he can be very accurate and very precise and all that type of stuff. But the Hyde, when you see Hyde in action, it's fucking different. I don't know. Does that track you? I don't know if you guys feel that way, but I really connect with that on an emotional level, because I think one of the things that a lot of men struggle with is what blocks them from the action is two kind of main things. One is that men are typically afraid of getting into trouble. Okay. Meaning that, geez, if I did something, I don't want to get charged. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to get into trouble with the police. And geez, how would that impact my life? And then the second kind of continuation of that is they're worried they're going to get it wrong. Because even if they're like, fuck it. If I get in trouble, I get in trouble. I'll have to deal with that. I don't want that, but if I have to, I'll deal with that. But then the next side of it is they're like, but geez, I don't want to be wrong. What if I did this to somebody and yeah, the guy's a fucking total asshole, but he doesn't deserve that. Like he doesn't deserve what I did to him or what I'm about to do to him or what I'm willing to do to him. Like, because they haven't been trained to understand and identify and articulate what constitutes a threat. But, bad guys take actions. There's a stimulus. People do things. People take actions. And a lot of times they don't even understand what their actions, the consequences of their actions. Right? But there's an action. And so if you understand how to read that action and interpret that level of threat, then you have the confidence to understand what is an appropriate response to that threat. And that's where you got people that have real decisive tactical decision-making skill sets. Those people are dangerous. But that's exactly what you want out there, is you want men that have the knowledge, that have the confidence and security that comes with understanding what their legal rights are, what people can and cannot do. And then when you have certain people that make decisions and do things that are, a threat, harassing, or illegal, and then they're shocked that somebody took, that someone's taking countermeasures to this, like that there's going to be repercussions to this stuff if you have weaponized people. Does that all kind of make sense? You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, I think maybe just because over the last little bit, just again, of course, we're working with so many new clients and stuff now that I see the trend, I see the alchemy happening in these people. Between people that come in with the willingness and the desire to want to protect, and I genuinely believe it's authentic, but they don't have the capability, they don't have the quite the legal understanding, they don't have the formulated mindset, they have a lot of uncertainty, they have willingness, but they have a lot of uncertainty around that. And that creates hesitation. And that creates inaction. Right? We have that same benefit of the doubt yourself to death, because you just keep benefiting. Oh no, it's probably nothing. It's probably nothing. But the more that they train, the more you start to see them recognize their power of like, man, I see this now for what it is. My brain doesn't make it worse than it is. I see it for what it is, because sometimes it's bad enough. You don't have to make shit up. But I see it for what it is. But then I can feel the hesitation in them being willing to take the action still, right? So what is that? You say, I will defend and protect myself when threatened. Then, but you go, but I'm not 100% sure what constitutes a threat. Then you clear that up. So they get capabilities, they have the willingness, they develop the capabilities, and they develop the recognition. So the legal understanding, the recognition of a threat. Then all of a sudden, the threat is there, the threat is real, they have the capability, and yet they hesitate. So what's that link? Why would somebody hesitate when the threat is there? Even if somebody was standing there, a Supreme Court judge is standing there telling them, you are legally well within your rights to defend and protect yourself and your family at this moment. There's still some hesitation often. And that's because what you might need to do, the actions you might need to take, are not easy actions to take. It's not easy when your whole entire life, the last thing you want to do is take any of these actions. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like, can we understand that a soldier going to the combat, he might be trained for 5-10 years. All of a sudden he's deployed to his first combat zone and somebody shoots at him and he's sitting there going like, do I shoot back or don't I? And then somebody else starts shooting, one of his buddies starts shooting back and he's like, okay. Or someone tells him, fuck dude, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? Okay. Now he's on the trigger. But once he's been exposed a couple times, now he knows that motherfucker shoots at me, I'm shooting back. Hell, if I even think that guy's going to shoot at me, you know what I mean? Like there's rules of engagement, but do you get what I mean? What switched in him? And so often when you talk to these soldiers and stuff, it's exactly what it is. You just start, all of a sudden it becomes your world. Like, yeah, there's people trying to kill me. And so.
Yeah, I think just a really quick point that, what I'm hearing you say is like, where are you putting the responsibility of the decision?
Yes.
If you're taking all the responsibility on yourself, you're going to have a lot of moral pushback based on your upbringing. But as a general kind of comment in our society, I think in that case, yeah, if you put all the responsibility on you as to taking those types of actions, that's going to be hard. There's going to be pushback. But if you start to understand more what violence really is and be like, I didn't seek this. I didn't go looking for this. I didn't invite this into my space, my home, whatever it is. It's like, you chose that. Do you know what I mean? You chose the time, the place. You chose me. So this is all on you, man. Like, and as you said earlier tonight, they take an action. There's going to be a reaction to that. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think where the responsibility falls really can make a big difference on your mindset to all of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. You really did, Dustin. I mean, I was a little bit spinning my tires on trying to get the point across, and that was a really good way to distill it down to just the responsibility of the decision, because one of my, actually, this is almost harder for me to talk about because this is one of my core fundamental values and beliefs. And and the analogy I have in my head is really people have a God complex. And that is like, I get instantaneously like just, that wants to pull out the Hyde side of me, because there are people in this world that walk around, very evil people. And again, I'm not talking all serial killers and stuff. I'm talking about there's some nasty fucking people in this world that even just mentally and emotionally walk around and just want nothing more than to just fucking destroy any type of happiness that they see in other people. You know what I mean? They're just, it's that God thing where they're like, I'm going to insert myself into your life right now, and I'm going to fuck with your life. And yet they believe that they can do that with zero consequences to those actions. And that is because there are so many people that are unweaponized, uneducated, untrained, unwilling, unprepared to do what needs to be done or even know what that is. And that's the part where it's like, you choose to interfere with my life. Well, I'm now going to, like, you've inserted me into your life, and so now this is what you get. Like, and that's I think that's also the power that people feel when you are trained and prepared. You don't want anyone to fight. I get guys say this to me all the time. Then Brad, I'll let Jim, and I feel like you're sitting there chomping at the bit a bit. But I get guys that all come and say, and every day they come and they say, listen, I just want to be fucking left alone. I just want to be left alone and live my life. I just want to, I get up, I go to work, I come home, it's time with family. Just leave me the fuck alone. But yet they're here training. Why? Because they go, people will not leave me the fuck alone. People want to insert themselves into somebody else's fucking life. And it's like, okay. All right. Like, okay. And yet they're like, you think that comes with no repercussions? You think someone's just going to go, like, you also have a life, and now that you've inserted them in your life, this goes both ways. And you have no idea what you're unleashing. I was remember that one inmate, you know what I mean, that shot caller in prison, and just talking about, people do things and people look at me and people say things, and he goes, I just sit in my head, go, you have no idea what you're asking for. You have no idea what you're asking for, because they just don't. There's, yeah, it's a huge problem, right? And I mean, like, this is not really what we do on the podcast, but we can reference it really quickly. But this is what you're seeing in society, right? People feel like they have the right to say anything to anybody at any fucking time about something that has nothing to do with them. People, you know what I mean? That people just don't understand how to mind their own fucking business anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they just really don't. And again, you can balance that with saying it's great that, if you have a society or a culture of people that are willing to stand up and whatever, but you get what I mean by this. We're talking about these checks and balances, where just how many times have we all seen this in the last little bit, where people just feel like they are entitled to say anything to anyone at any time, and no repercussions should ever come to them. And if there are repercussions, if that does happen, then people are like, that person should be arrested and, tried. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they're in absolute shock that somebody did anything or said anything back to them. Like, I can say what I want to say, but you can't say what you want to say. I can do this to you. I can fuck with you and your family, but you can't do shit to me. Oh, fucking really? You know what I mean? Like, really? Like, you really fucking think that? And you think you have no vulnerable spots? Like, oh my God, like, it's just, this is this whole thing. So, and that's what cycles back to what I think training does. Like, I could have easily called this personal versus professional, right? Because you have this professional side of ourselves, and we have this personal side. And the personal side is what people see. This, like Dustin talked about, like, you're nice, you're happy, you're super compassionate. Most people that are trained, highly trained in violence, are some of the nicest, most compassionate, caring people, because they're balanced on both sides, because they have been trained to develop. The more you are trained in violence, the more that you, at the exact same time, your humanity and your empathy is also being developed. Like, it's a yin and yang. They both grow together, Because again, someone that understands death and war and the horrors and atrocities of all of that doesn't want that. They value at a much higher degree peace and, you know, empathy and just just live your life and be happy and just all of those different things, the freedoms and all that stuff. We just value that. But it's like, yeah, like you know, but I liked the, you know, and so of course you can have the professional side of this weaponized guy, but I think again, when you say like the trained side of you is the professional side of you, and it absolutely is. But people don't get the level of savagery that you have to train to, because when you're talking about people trying to murder your family and they're coming in outgunned and outmanned, you know, facing like just a nightmare of an atrocity, you need Mr. Hyde, right? And Mr. Hyde is justifiably, legally, morally, empowered to protect his life. The only right that matters is his life. And if that life is being threatened, then fucking doom on you. Like, and that's where the training has to go. And so now we're back kind of a full circle thing to being like, there's nothing nice about violence. Whether that's bad, evil people using violence to destroy, degrade, debase, dehumanize, or whether it's good people caught in that moment using the tool of violence to destroy, degrade, not degrade, but to destroy, defend, and protect and preserve life. But violence is about destruction. So either way, good or evil, you have destruction as the first thing. But then after that, it's changed. You know what I mean? To protect, to preserve, right? Whereas the other side is to degrade and dehumanize and debase. And that's where the differences come in. That's then the context behind determines the content. And that's the difference between self-defense and murder, is what was the intent behind this. Okay, so I don't know. Yeah, for me, it's I don't think there's enough conversations about this. I don't think there's definitely enough training that goes into and incorporates these types of conversations. Because to me, these are part of the hard reality conversations that we have to have, because training somebody in all of the physical skill sets, all of the strategies and all of the tactics, who is unwilling, you know, basically who has a line in the sand that they're not willing to cross, it's kind of like having a police officer who's unwilling to carry a gun. Right? Or having kind of an illiterate librarian. Like, you know, it's just really good people maybe, you know, have good intentions, but they're really quite useless. So that in and of itself can be a different podcast and conversation, because where is the line in the sand for everybody? We've met lots of guys over the years who are unwilling to even consider the thought of using lethal force. They don't obviously train with us that long, because our training typically starts at lethal force, meaning, you know, what happens when you're now faced with the option of you have to take life to preserve life. Like, that is the lowest common denominator of any type of quote unquote self-defense or personal protection. It's the worst thing you'd ever have to do. It's the most dire situation you'd ever have to be in. I have to take a life to preserve a life. Right? So the conversation has to start there. Training doesn't get you there eventually. Training should start there. And then it teaches you better threat recognition, all these things. And then pretty soon you don't ever have to go there, because you just understand, you have the training, knowledge, and skill sets to box those threats or de-escalate or remove or deter. And so you just become an infinitely harder fucking target. And that again, in and of itself, is such a weird concept, right? Start by training people to be the absolute, you know, most savage version of Mr. Hyde they can be. Absolutely fucking ruthless, willing to do whatever. Obviously, the safety catch for that is you're teaching them when legally and morally justified, and what that means and what that entails. And then from there, they just get better and better and better, and then they get better, like I said, all the other stuff, better threat recognition, better all the stuff, and now they just become such a hard target that they don't find themselves in those situations. Or they've de-escalated, diffused, or removed themselves before it ever comes to that. It's a weird thing, right? Guys that are capable of killing will be the last guys that will ever need to kill.
Mm-hmm.
because they have the capability. It just won't, so many things that happen in front of that to prevent that. Where the people that have no training and understanding of that are far more likely to end up in a position where that's exactly what it's going to take now at this point, because you've let things get so out of control. There is no choice anymore. It's escalated well beyond. Sorry, Brad?
Well, it goes back to what we talked about early on in the podcast. At the very beginning, you have DC, right? Disengaged combat, conflict. And it's like, that seed's going to plant, and that's going to grow, and it's going to go in that linear progression.
Yeah. And
a guy that understands the tool of violence and how to take life to preserve life, once that happens, they are responding to that situation.
Yeah.
And that could be, let's say that's a removing or whatever the action happens to be. They've made a choice and they've taken an action. But without those skill sets, they, like you said, people sit, they linger, they deny, they benefit the doubt, all these things. And now it's progressed so far that, now like you're in that realm, and to take that sort of action by accident, you're in a whole other different realm of trauma.
Yeah. It's I don't want to get too deep into this because it's not my story to talk about right now, but it's and I haven't cleared it with the other person, but one of my clients is involved in a situation where there is a external threat. It's not a physical threat at this point, but there's an external threat, and you know what I mean? It's kind of been going on for a few months, but it was like with one conversation, because he just started training not that long ago, with one conversation, we were just able to identify 7 different, strategies and tactics that this person is now in the process of implementing that is going to completely change the outcome of this situation. But prior to this one conversation, the person was like, I don't know what to do. Matter of fact, it was the catalyst to why they started training, because what they were doing is going, there's this external thing. It's happening. I don't know what to do. So what they're doing is going into the future and going, but if it's progressed to this point after a few months, in another 8 months or a year or less, I don't know, he can only see it coming to some sort of a physical, now it's a physical threat. And I'm like, hang on a second, like, why the fuck is your plan to wait until it gets to this fucking point? Because once it gets to this point, now you may have to do things that A, you don't want to do, and B, it's like it's much harder to do. Like you're just waiting for this, it's like you go in your basement and you come running out of your basement and run up your stairs and lie in bed, and your wife goes, "What the fuck's the matter?" Well, there's a small fire in the basement. I mean, right now it's only about a foot high. It's in the corner right outside the utility room, but fuck, last I looked, the thing was growing. Do you know what I mean? You're just going to lie upstairs. Smokes, you know what I mean? Smoke, you don't just open the window and go back to bed like when, there's a fucking fire, let's do something. But all of a sudden now this person has, computer forensics, tracing IP addresses, just all of these different things are in play now that, again, just like, no, man, this person doesn't have the leverage they think they have, first off. And the second thing is, it's time to just, like start putting in your countermeasures. And the cool thing about this is like, this has nothing to do with anything physical yet. But like these countermeasures are there, and these countermeasures will, probably deter the whole thing, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, a case file is being built. All of these things are being built. The police file's open. Like I said, the computer forensics is already on the case. It's just today's day and age, right? There's a blocked number, and you can't call someone from a blocked number and not understand that there's call tracing now. That you can't just block your caller ID and go, now I'm totally anonymous and think you have that power. It's like, that's fucking hilarious. Like you just phone your phone company and say, this is a harassing call. Like call trace it. And they're like, okay, here's the number. And then you take that number and you reverse track it. Now you have their home address. And it's like now this person who thinks they're anonymous is like, yeah, I know exactly where you live. Like fucking like people don't understand. There are again, and who does that? Who takes those actions? Not Dr. Jekyll. It's the Mr. Hyde that goes, "Oh, you injected yourself into my life. Fucking doom on you." Because you're not going to play God in my life, motherfucker. And don't think that I have some, you think I'm just going to sit there and take that? You fucking mistaken me for one of the victims of the world. And I'm not a victim. You know what I mean? Like that has to bring out a different visceral response. There's that one undercover cop, you know what I mean, in Colonel Grossman's books and stuff, but gets shot the back of the bus, and he's lying on the back of the bus, and he's like, I can't move, I can't this is where I'm going to die. And then all of a sudden he looks at the dirty floor underneath this dirty fucking bus seat and sees the guy's feet coming to him, and his brain's just like, fuck this shit. I'm not dying on this dirty goddamn floor, shot to death by this fucking drug, gets up and gets up and fights, but, ends up killing the guy and saving his own life. But it was just a mind switch from the Dr. Jekyll to the Mr. Hyde. Right? Just that part of it of like, fuck you, doom on you. You want to think evil? Screw you. You know what I mean? Like you can take actions and think there's no repercussions, but no. You got to get in the fight. Right? You do something because it is something. And again, that's a scale from a 1 to a 10. It's a wide spectrum. But when you're trained, you can understand and respond or take actions appropriate to the situation. Context determines content. And that's the safety catch. Context determines content. Right? So I don't know. Any other things, guys, on this one? I don't know. It was just really interesting. Again, it's just something I think about quite often, and I see the alchemy of guys developing this side of themselves, yet with the right legal and moral restraints to that. And that's what I think is important. And again, probably really hard for a lot of people to understand that you can be okay with taking life. You can be trained to take life. You can be willing. You can address those things. You train and face the horrors of violence and the things that you may have to do, and yet never have, at the same time, you're not building any type of a desire to ever want to do it. As a matter of fact, you're deeply cultivating the exact fucking opposite. I just want to be fucking left alone. I just want to live my life. I mean, you can ask anybody that's been to war, a lot of them would be willing to go back and do what they did because they deeply believe. But most of them are like, I just want to live my life in peace, man. Fuck that shit. Like being willing, having the capability, to take those actions and do that doesn't mean that that's what you want. Matter of fact, 9 out of 10 times you just want the exact fucking opposite of that. And I think that's how we all genuinely feel. Right. And I think that gets built up. The more you train this and the more you get deeper into this, the more you just want to be left alone and just want to be a good person and, all of that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, a dog that starts barking at you with the intention to bite needs to be responded to because those actions have consequences from whatever level, 0 or from 1 to 10. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, interesting conversation. I don't know. Anything else on your guys' part with this?
Not for me.
Nope. All good.
Okay, guys. Well, let's wrap it up here. Yeah, I appreciate you guys' time as always. Appreciate everyone that listens, shares, follows, likes. We appreciate that, you guys. Listen, stay safe. It's a crazy world out there, man. Yeah, there's unfortunately lots of people that they don't think about their actions. They think there are no consequences. Many times, again, we just, being able to let things go, walk away, turn the other cheek, all that type of stuff. It's all great. And that is exactly, remove, de-escalate, and deter. There's just very few things that are worth it. One of our core tenets is I have 3 things in my life that I'm not willing to walk away from, and everything else I can do it in 30 seconds or less. And that's the people that I love. And the second that there's a threat to those people or to me, then we're going to do something. We're going to take action because that's not what happens in our world. You don't threaten people that are willing to protect, that are trained to protect. You don't get away with that. Actions have reactions. Action have consequences. But at the same time, when you meet people that are willing to do these things, they're going to be among the nicest people you've ever met. There's lots of people walking around that just don't understand that their actions have consequences. So, as as much as we can, we just live our lives. But at the end of the day, I agree with Colonel Jeff Cooper. Those that want to threaten, intimidate, harass, or harm other people need to start learning to fear their intended victims, because that's how you're going to change this behavior. And one other thing I heard from Barry Holland, who's I respect a lot. Those types of people don't stop threatening, harming, harassing, or assaulting everybody. They just stop doing it to you. And that's the power of weaponizing. Because you don't throw a punch at someone, and not expect to get punched back in the face. I mean, that's something my dad taught me way back in the day, right? So anyways, all right, that's it, guys. Thank you, guys. Dustin, Brad, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. Everybody else, stay safe, stay weaponized. Chat again soon, everybody. Take care.